Hey everyone, we are back with our new episode of Full Funnel Live. And for this week, we selected a topic that apparently appeared on our radar for quite a few months repeatedly. And more precisely, whenever we had discovery calls with the new prospects about account-based marketing, there was kind of a repetitive pattern where, let's say, CMOs or VPs of marketing we were talking to, they were saying, my team is anyhow running ABM, we are doing some sort of it, and like how can we refine it, right? And the truth is that if somebody is coming to us, it means that they are usually not satisfied with how their program performed. But on another, let's say, side, they have sales team, product, client success, leadership, who might have different opinions about account-based marketing, different perception or understanding of account-based marketing, the role of marketing and sales in ABM, right? And what we decided to do today is basically sharing with you the 6 core components. Obviously, you can spend way more time and we could prepare a much bigger list for your audit, but we just selected the 6 most common areas where companies are not, let's say, they are making mistakes that are leading to, let's say, lower efficacy of their ABM programs, right? Let's put it like this. I don't want to call it they're doing it wrong way or they're doing it incorrectly, but let's say they're doing it that way that leads to the program underperformance. That's the key. So we're going to share with you these 6 core areas. We'll share the setup that leads to the lower efficacy and the setup that leads to the better efficacy and how to fix it, right? How to go from, let's say, how to refine it. You're very welcome to ask any questions and let us know in the chat where you guys all joining us from. We're again broadcasting from sunny and warm Spain. Let us know in the chat where you guys all join us from. And while you're typing, I'll just quickly move forward, right? The current state of ABM that we are constantly here is what I just said, and this is how this is. This was recently defined by one of, let's say, B2B CMOs we were talking about ABM. We are doing ABM already. We have a named account list that our sales team is targeting, and our marketing team is trying to get in front of them. Technically, that could be called account-based marketing. You have the shared list of accounts, sales are prospecting them, and marketing is targeting them. Can you call it ABM? For sure, right? But the problem is what's Jale, the CEO and co-founder of Mutiny, described brilliantly in that post, right? That ABM is the teenage sex of the new decade, right? A lot of, well, let's say everybody is talking about it. Few are actually doing it. Now almost nobody is good at it, right? And the problem is that there is no formal education of ABM. Let's be honest, where do most of us learned about ABM? Most of us learned it from the content created by ABM vendors, by platform, first of all, by technology vendors, by platforms, right? And that set up the understanding, while let's say not so many of us learned it the hard way. For example, Vlad used to work for Sony, for big corporations and corporate projects. I used to be in enterprise sales and marketing, where my market was limited to kind of 50 plus core retail chains, and the contract values varied from $500K to $50 million per year, right? And then the only thing that you could do is just account-based marketing. And we have kind of pretty different understanding of how good ABM looks like compared to, let's say, the conventional ABM knowledge. So that being said, this is kind of the state, right? The state that lots of teams, they think they are doing ABM, but it quite often it underperforms. So from that perspective, we are going to share with you these 6 core layers, highlight the setup of, like, let's say, low efficacy setup and high efficacy setup and how to fix it. And the first one where I'm going to pass microphone to Vlad is account list building and account selection, right? The most kind of where the most common mistake is happening.
Thank you, Andrei. Hello, welcome to everybody joining from actually all over the world. And as always, there was some discussion about ABX. Peyton said ABX was a joke, never caught on. But it's true that actually I run into this frequently, that internally in the organizations, the fact that we call account-based marketing marketing, that there is a word marketing in it, just makes everybody assume it's a marketing responsibility. And the way that we were thinking about this internally, and sometimes how we present this to prospects, is account-based motion, just to kind of avoid the marketing trap, because indeed, when done without sales, it's not effective. Right, so let's dive into the first aspect. And when we looked at the programs, because a lot of times we might be invited by our prospects and our clients to help them fix an ineffective program, ineffective account-based marketing program or account-based motion. And one of the categories, or one of the characteristics of, let's say, good, well-performing programs and also well-performing programs that we see everywhere, that makes one of the biggest differences, is exactly how the list was built. And the low efficacy way of building the list, and something that we see everywhere, is usually the sales will share their lists with marketing. And maybe in addition, what happens quite frequently is, hey, you know what? These are our lists of target accounts. And by the way, these are the industries that we are focused on. So marketing, what they do is they basically kind of build 2 lists. There is the sales list, and then they also include, in a broader way, targeting, let's say, all the financial service companies in the United States, all SaaS companies that are larger than 500 employees in North America, or such broad targeting based on the industry, the size of the organization, and then targeting specific titles in there. And while there's actually nothing wrong with sales lists per se, the problem is that I always think about this anecdote when I was speaking to one sales director, and I asked him about how their sales lists were built. And he was like, well, we just take the biggest accounts in our territory. That's basically how they build a list. And I'm not saying that every sales team is doing that. They're, let's say, more advanced or more refined ways in which they are building the list. But very frequently, these lists are, there is no indication that these accounts actually may have a need. There is no indication that they might actually be a good fit. There are no specific, there is not sufficient research being done to basically say, hey, you know what, these are a good fit. They actually have a need, or there is some indication, some signals that these accounts may have a need for a product like us. And there is another aspect of it, and this is, so other than being broad or having lists where there is no necessarily intent, there is not even necessarily a product need, is that these lists are treated as static. And what do we mean by that? Is there is a list, and we go after that list, and that doesn't change. Well, maybe it's reviewed quarterly or yearly or whatever, but usually this is a static list. And of course, we know that these accounts, they don't sit still. There's stuff that is happening in the market. There is stuff that is happening within those accounts. And we need to take that into account. In other words, we need a more dynamic view of our target account. So how does a list selection look like? for high efficacy programs or those who usually achieve better conversions, better results, is that we can take those sales lists for sure as a source, but we also look at the intent data, the intent based on the research and the intent data, not just intent, and engagement data. And we actually, so again, you don't necessarily have to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to ignore the sales list. You can actually, in a lot of organizations, you might not even have that choice. You might have to actually focus on the sales list, but at least what you need to do is prioritization of those lists. So from the hundreds of accounts that are in that list, which of those do we need to focus on, and not necessarily, hey, just let's sort them by size and start from top to bottom. Let's take the top 10. So when we are talking about the numbers here, we are talking about numbers that are related to the number of people who are actually actively working in the program. So you cannot just say, you know, your list should have 50 accounts. Well, depends on how many salespeople are actually involved in actively engaging with those accounts, because one person, if one person is supposed to create personalized approach, an account plan, and a personalized approach to each of the 10 different buyers in those 50 accounts, we're talking about 5,000 people, 50 accounts with I don't know how many different departments that you need to study, understand, research, engage, etc., etc. That's obviously impossible. That's why we always speak about the size of the list in function of the number of salespeople that are involved in the ABM program. Okay, and then I also mentioned prioritization, and the way that we look at prioritization is basically according to three main criteria. Let's say the level of awareness. Are these accounts even aware of us, or are they not aware of us? In other words, if these accounts don't even know that we exist, if they're not regularly engaging, visiting our website, or aware of basically our value proposition, what we can mean to them, then that will be our job, right? So our job is then to basically create awareness. And there we can have a larger amount of accounts, and it's usually marketing mainly who is kind of taking care of those accounts and creating awareness. Now that we have accounts that are aware of us, then we can make a difference. Okay, they seem to know us, but do we know them? In other words, do we have any indication that they actually have an active need? Is there some indication that they're actually looking to solve a specific problem? Is there some priority, some strategic priority initiative, a strategic initiative happening in those target accounts that might be driving the need for change? Are there new executives coming on? Are they hiring new personnel? Are they in target department? Let's say in our case, maybe they're hiring a new ABM lead. Are there any other indications that are meaningful to you that these accounts may be showing some signals, that you can basically, based on your research, based on these signals, derive that they may have a need? And it's also very important to take into account that not everything can be found out by just looking at their website, at their quarterly updates, or any other public information that we have access to. Some of the information, actually the most interesting information, you can only get from the inside, from the buyers, from the people who are inside those accounts. I sometimes call it like insider information, because maybe there is like strategic priorities on the high level that have been communicated by the CEO, but really how that trickles down and how that translates and whether they're actually actively looking for a solution to a specific problem, you might only be able to find that out through a call or other kinds of conversation with the buyer. And that's why it's so important that we also involve sales, especially sales development, earlier in the process. And that's why we speak about this middle list. So the left one that you see here is cluster ICP. These are all the accounts that belong to the target cluster that we have identified and want to focus on, that are not aware of us. And then those that are aware of us, but we don't really know them, we don't have the information. Now what we need to do is we need to start researching those accounts. We need to map their buyers. We need to start engaging those buyers and try to get information from both research, the signals, their engagement, intent signals, but also through that engagement, through that sales engagement, also try to get some insider information. And finally, the third group are those who we know them, they know us. There is sufficient evidence, signals to make us believe that they indeed have a need, and they are actually, there's multiple engagements. Maybe there is an initial relationship, at least like there is maybe a back and forth between one of our salespeople and one of their buyers, even if it's just on social or email. So we are able to kind of start a conversation with them. We put them in active focus. So these are the accounts that we are focusing on. So coming back to the numbers, how big this list should be. Well, when you look at the active focus, where you are basically driving kind of personalized, one-on-one personalized programs, trying to engage in book discovery calls with those accounts. There we are talking about, maximum 10. We are talking about a handful of accounts. And when we're talking about future pipeline accounts, we are talking about a couple of dozen, right? So we are not talking about, I think maximum 50. Maximum 50 is really already quite a lot, I would say, right? You may even have 50 just in the cluster ICP account, depending on the size of the account, complexity, the number of buyers that you will have there. So to sum it all up, what we want to do is we want to prioritize accounts that based on their level of awareness, based on also their revenue potential, and also whether there are any signals that they're engaging, there is some relationship being formed, and there are some signals that they might actually be in the market, that they might actually at least have a problem, high priority problem, they have the need for your product. These are the kind of main criteria that we would use to select those accounts. So very different than just going after all the accounts that sales sent to you.
Yeah, and also I would love to say that it's very different from like conventional ABM knowledge, where you have one to many, one to few, one to one, and you separate all the accounts, and then whatever you define for one to one, I want to have the X number of accounts. And what happens here, it's maybe the biggest, where the biggest, let's say, challenge lies is marketing says, hey, here's the philosophy of one-to-one sales. Say, oh, fantastic, we have prioritized this, let's say, 5 biggest accounts in our area, which seems to be fine. But the problem is, let's think about, we want to sell to JP Morgan, right? And 5 biggest banks, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, you name it, right? What happens next? We have no connections there. We have no idea if they're in the market, or if any business unit is in the market with whom we should engage, etc. Which means that with one-to-one ABM, we are supposed to create awareness first. But will sales actually be doing this? And let's ask a honest question. Are there any organizations that will allow sales and marketing spend enormous time on just creating awareness in one account, and at the end just to understand that this account is not in the market? This is the biggest problem, and this is where we feel the fundamental mistake lies when companies say, hey, we are doing this one-to-one, one-to-many, etc., and when they start selecting account and matching it to everything. Now, as we promised, we are going to share how to fix it. So what I did, I also made screenshots from our course about account-based marketing. So if you guys would love to dive deeper into the process, because obviously we can't just come up with the actual exercises and show this in detail. So we are going just to explain the principles here. But if you want to dive deeper, you can you can take our course, which is the part of Full Funnel Academy now. What we are going to do as the first step for this account selection, right? We need to as Vlad mentioned, we need to define account qualification criteria, right? What criteria we are going to apply to generally select the accounts first, and then define this account prioritization criteria, how we are going to segment these accounts between these three sublists. Where should we start? We shouldn't start just simply asking sales, hey, what are the best accounts we want to target? The best scenario is when you pick up one specific use case, and we spoke many times about why use case or cluster-based ABM is much better than, let's say, vertical-based, etc. For a specific use case, you extract the biggest deals and the fastest deals. Depending on how much data you have, we usually recommend to look at the last 12 to 18 months because it's still fresh, right? And we recommend you to extract maybe 3 to 5 deals, again, depending on how much data you have, right? For that specific use case, biggest and fastest deals. And also we recommend to look at the 5 recently lost deals for the same specific use case. When you extract this data, you can start, and this is obviously a joint exercise between marketing and sales. You need to involve also account executives for this exercise. You need to discuss, okay, so what are the patterns we are seeing here? What are the characteristics of the accounts that are making them a great fit? And it could be, firmographics, everybody knows. I don't need to speak a lot about this. But what are the criteria? Maybe some technology setup, maybe missing critical components in their infrastructure. Maybe they are hiring for specific roles, and this is an evidence that this company is going to prioritize a specific solution, opening new offices, whatever, right? The key point is to understand these patterns. And our next step, why we are doing this, we want to leverage these patterns and create account qualification and disqualification criteria. You can see our example. Obviously, our example is way more simplified. We are not, let's say, we're not that sophisticated company, and we already operate in a pretty niche market. But still, you can see some important criteria for us. For example, the distributed go-to-market teams. We know that let's say from the longevity of our projects, the companies that have multiple go-to-market teams and multiple regions, let's say EMEA, North America, APAC, etc. Right? For us, this is a sweet spot because then we help these companies to create a central framework and adapt it to the regions. We look at also at sales and marketing team size because the question is, do we actually have, from the company side, right? Do we actually have resources to implement ABM? Because let's not pretend that it could be done, with just somebody who is going to spend a few hours a week and assume that it will move the needle, right? This is the key. Next, when you analyze these deals, it's essential to extract the entire buying committee, not just saying, hey, we are selling to the piece of IT. No, but you just need to understand the entire architecture from top to the bottom, right? Who are the end users? Who are the champions? Who are the decision makers and budget holders, etc. And if you do a deep analysis, not just generic, statement, hey, we are selling to this VP plus or C plus level. No, when you start looking at when you start analyzing these deals, you'll see who exactly is engaging, and you can uncover tons of different profiles that will be helpful for your marketing. And lastly, why we do the analysis of lost deals? Because we want to understand the same patterns, right? What makes this account a bad fit? Because sometimes there are companies, like you can see the account qualification criteria on the paper, they looks fantastic, right? And we want to, we say, okay, this is the perfect account, we are going to work with it. But then you have a discovery call, and then you realize that it's a bad company due to certain criteria, right? So that's why it's essential to identify this criteria, make them tangible together with sales, and then when you receive sales list, the first thing that you do, you qualify all accounts due to this jointly approved account qualification criteria. When it's prioritized, then you start doing this account prioritization criteria, what Vlad already covered. Cluster ICP, very simple. Here would be all qualified accounts, right? Now, which of those accounts should be moved to future pipeline accounts? You need to sit down again together with sales and create a joint definition of engaged or a account that is aware of your product, right? There is like sometimes we are getting this question, what is like a good indicator of brand awareness? And the only good answer to this is the one that you agree together with sales that you can leverage, right? You need to kind of define the behavior if you want some signals that this account should demonstrate, so you can say for sure, okay, this account is engaged, we can now move it to the future pipeline list, right? Where you are going to spend more time on the buying committee mapping, multi-threading, engagement, etc., to validate their needs. And lastly, active focus. The same story. What criteria will tell us that this account is in the market? There is an evident need that we can help them with our product. We can create this. We can create certain solutions for them, and we have the relationship with these accounts. So these are the core steps that you need to take, and you go from like, okay, we are trying to get in front of the accounts that sales are prospecting, to precise account lists where you know what you both, I mean, both marketing and sales are going to do. This is critical. So that being said, let's move to the second layer, which is our favorite, account research. Everybody claims they are doing this, but bear to us, quite often it's very far from how good account research looks like and how it should be leveraged. And before I will pass microphone to Vlad, guys, feel free to type your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section where we'll make sure we're going to answer them. So now, with that being said, let's move to the account research.
So account research is, you might do a bit of research or the initial research when you're qualifying the accounts to even include them in your list. But once the accounts once the accounts are included in your future pipeline list, the second priority, let's say, is when you should start more in-depth research. So let's look at how it looks like when it's done, let's say, with room for improvement, and how it can be done better. So a lot of companies, actually, I think it's not that the companies and that there are no individuals within those companies that are not doing account research. I'm sure that there's always a few good account executives who will spend a lot of time and will know exactly what to look at when they have a qualified opportunity or a qualified inbound, let's say, lead or something like that. They will spend time on that target account, and they will dive and they will do a lot of research there. What we're talking about is actually something that should happen earlier as a part of developing that pipeline. So account executives are really good, but they are focusing on active pipeline, and I'm talking about a step before. And this step is usually supposed to be done by the BDRs, SDRs. In some companies that actually have account-based marketing staff, have actually team members, they're doing part of that research. And then it's kind of, I think the biggest problem is that there is no standard. There is no standardized process. And the biggest problem with that is not that we are such stickler for having a checklist, but it's really about what is the actual information that we are looking at, that we are looking for. What do we need to know about those accounts? And as important, what are we going to do with that information? Because I've seen a lot of times what happens is that, maybe a consulting company comes in or they hear about it. Okay, we should do more research and personalize more. But what really happens is that they start with that research, they uncover a lot of interesting information, but then, okay, what do we do with that? I think that's also important to basically connect the dots between that research and actually what you're doing with that, so that it actually starts making sense that you're putting that in practice. So standardized process. What is the information that we are looking for and why? Second, how are we doing that? Is it just pure purely based on what the databases and technology, like tools like deep research from ChatGPT or Clay can do for us and find out in a quote unquote scalable way. And like, where is this information stored? Like, is this information that, very frequently it might be in that Clay table, or it might be, at the best case, some of the data might end up in the CRM. But in most cases, what is missing is a kind of a 360 view of that account, because there is very frequently some information that marketing has in their system. There is some information that sales might have in their tools. Maybe even a lot of times I've seen like sales simply having each salesperson having their own spreadsheet or a document for each account that they're researching. And maybe some information is in the CRM. And these silos also create this, what we call account blindness, right? So what do you look for? How you're going to use it? Is it limited to what the technology can find out in a quote unquote scalable way? And whether you have one place where you're actually collecting all of that information. And then I mentioned already the way that it's being used very frequently in low efficacy account research approaches. What we're basically looking for is to get some insight about that target account, so that we can say, hey, Andrei, I see that you're focusing on training client teams through Full Funnel Academy, right? And then basically I mean, it's true, it's personalized, it's true, right? But what you see there as the third sentence, I've built an AI system that delivers 10 to 20 qualified meetings a month, which is the pitch of the product. That doesn't change. So it's not like I have a solution to your problem. No, I have a solution, I have a hammer, and everything looks like a nail. And I don't care. I just want to attract your attention with that first sentence, but then I'm going to pitch you the unrelated meeting. So I love how John Miller explains this. He says, now each prospect gets a uniquely personalized, uniquely irrelevant email in their inbox, which is really what this is, if you look at it, right? So how does it, where does this come from? A lot of it comes from actually from the technology providers. I highly doubt, please correct me if I'm wrong, if there is anybody who is attending this live who hasn't heard about Clay or maybe GTM engineering. They're like very hot terms about AI agents that are running the SDR motion and replacing whole teams and doing all this research and personalized outreach. There are different angles to the same story, which is the story that we are sharing here. Essentially, okay, let's get some information and then use that in the same old way, in the same old outbound way, trying to make the first part of the email, let's say, more personalized, but still basically doing the same for everybody. So a lot of marketing dollars have went into promoting tools like that, like Clay, and they have a huge community of people who are sharing recipes for Clay, etc. And we love the tool, we are using it ourselves. There is a lot of use for the tool itself. That tool itself is not a problem at all. So please don't get me wrong when I'm not here trying to beat down on Clay. I'm just saying that. Was that on the contrary?
Yeah, I'm just saying, on contrary, it's an amazing tool that is completely misused today.
It's being misused by a lot of people. Exactly. So, and it's a piece of the puzzle. That's how you need to treat it. So, what does a good account research look like? High efficacy is basically, first of all, you need to understand what are the actual research questions. What we always like to do is we like to sit down with an account exec. I also love to start with the sales director and then sit down with actual account executives and just take one specific account and just ask them basically, okay, if you had to pitch this account tomorrow, if you had to bet your commission on this account, what would you like to know? And then show me also step by step, just take us through this process. What are the questions that we would need to answer about this account? What are the things that you would like to know to be able to prepare a 100% personalized pitch, if you like, to also be able to evaluate whether it's worth betting information on this account, right? And so usually when you start going through one account and start digging deep, you may uncover like 10, 15 different research questions. You know, Andrei mentioned some of them that are more about qualifications and signals, like, you know, are they hiring a specific role? Maybe if your solution is linked to specific regulations, then specific locations may make sense. Other locations may make no sense, or specific locations, states, countries are really interesting right now because they have changing regulations. Maybe I took that example too far. You will be looking at things like basically how the team is structured. You will be looking at the company news specific. And when we say company news or updates, it's not about just like collecting the latest updates about the company, but you're looking about specific initiatives. So let's say you are selling a retail solution, and you know that you can the pain that you're solving is really very big for those retail chains who are opening new locations. Well, you may be looking for announcement of new locations being built or new acquisitions from that target account. So when I say company news, I mean the specific information that you can find in the company news. And maybe the way that I should have explained it is that there is a research question. Are they opening a new location? And then there is like the source. Where can we find that information? Is that information that we should find out on their website, in the company news? Should we Google that company? Should we Google interviews from the executives, on podcasts or in press? And also very important is not to disregard the information that you can basically only collect from the inside information, which you can basically only collect from people who work in that company, or maybe from common connections, right? So sometimes there is an important piece of information that you need to know that you will only be able to find that out by asking a question of somebody who works in that company. So the one last part that I wanted to mention here has to do with the removing the account blindness, or collecting all the information about that one account in one place. So what we always document is the questions. Okay, what is actually the information that you're trying to find out? Then why? How are we going to use this? Why is this important? How do we find that information? Where do we look for it? Is it information that we need to ask when we speak to the prospect at the event, or maybe it's something we can ask in a different way? I think Andrei will mention those examples. And how should we store that information? Is there a custom field in the CRM that we should fill out, or should we store it in the account scorecard note, or whatever you call it in your CRM? We usually like to keep them in the CRM. And once you know that, then I think, again, maybe Andrei will talk about this more, but only then it actually makes sense to try to deploy tools like Clay or other AI or other tools to get some of that information. But then you know exactly what it is that you're looking for. You know the source, you know how you will use it. And also, you have a quality benchmark. You can check whether what the tool will produce is complete enough, will give you quality information. Will it even be right? Because we all know that very frequently, doing account research, I've seen a lot of hallucinations. I've seen like a lot of accounts being selected. Oh, they're doing this, they're doing that. And when you dig deeper, you see this is news from 5 years ago. Although you explicitly said, I only want news from the last year. No, it's going to ignore it and it's going to still dig up the news from 5 years ago. Anyhow, without going into more detail, I think I covered kind of the main points about account research. And Andrei, maybe you can share the process.
Yeah, I would just also highlight the usage, right? Like that's why we all previously we discussed this philosophy of different lists. And when you have accounts in future pipeline and active focus lists, having this fundamental information would actually drive your next step. Because in ABM, there are no linear playbooks, especially when you move accounts to active focus where you want to create opportunity. You need to leverage the momentum and holistic info, like all this information that is available of accounts, not just saying, oh, but I read that in the playbook it says I need to send just an email or whatever. Somebody designed the linear playbooks. No way, you're not going to do this. Every single now, when account is engaged and you want to create sales opportunity, and we are talking about big deals, right? Let's be honest, we are not talking about selling $15 license. So the entire point is, okay, knowing this, how are we going to use this? Is there any piece of content I can send? Is there anything that I potentially can leverage? Who is going to connect with whom or contact whom, right? That is the essence. So with that being said, account research is not used only for personalized content outreach, though you can, we always say, if you have, let's say, low tier, I mean, by pricing level product, you have accounts with the lower deal value, you can do the, let's say, standard outbound, more personalized, etc. We are not talking about this. That's absolutely fine, right? But when it comes to the big deals and when it comes to ABM, this is not what you are supposed to do. Now, how we are going to fix it? This part Vlad already covered in pretty much detail. So the key point is that you need to have a standardized process. Obviously, for different use cases or for different products, the questions, the information you're going to collect would be different. And maybe with different regional teams, there would be a few adoptions, right? You might need to make some changes to the information you are collecting or the sources where you need to look at. But the entire point is that you need to have this process in place. And anybody in your team could efficiently run this process, let's say with 80% accuracy. This is the key. If you don't have this in place, forget about successful scaling. It would be all about, this is essential step in operationalizing ABM, right? Creating this documentation. So this is one of the core points, because then later, for example, depending on who owns account research, that's also to be defined as a part of the process. SDRs, or maybe you have account researchers, whoever, right? You can evaluate if they are doing the whole research according to your standard, or they are doing just part of it, whatever they want to do, or whatever seems easier for them to do. And next, you need to define these playbooks that could leverage this account research aside from just this outbound, the example that Vlad highlighted to you, because it's fine. It's like what we said. The personalization is there. The research was done that we are not only a consulting company, we also have full funnel academy, right, and courses. So, but it doesn't change the fact that it's absolutely irrelevant, right? So a couple of things, right? Here are just two examples. And again, if you guys are interested into this, you can dive into our academy or ABM course. Our favorite examples: personalized content. You repurpose or what we call the account love letters. You repurpose the account research and you create a nice piece of content about the company you have just researched. Here you can see one of the screenshots posted on the sales profile. You shouldn't necessarily be doing this, right? You can, if you want, you can create just even a personalized email saying, hey, this is what I was recently reading about your company, love this and that. So it's like this short story could resonate with you, right? It could be even published as kind of as a post on your company's page if you want. The entire point is that it's not about like, I have just researched this company, they are so miserable, like, and the only way for them to exist in 2026 is just by buying our product. And especially the CTO or put your target buyer persona, this person is struggling with A, B, C, D. I don't know how they are surviving up to this. So it's just the only way like for them to move forward is by buying our product. No, you turn it into a nice story, a nice collateral, highlighting positive things, and you use it as an opportunity to start conversation. Content distribution. We always say quite often we have these discussions with the marketing team about what is the best channel to distribute your content. But we need to flip that question and think about why we create the content. Do we create the content to influence our buyers, right? To attract their attention, to make sure that they would consider our product when they would be shopping, let's put it like this. Is this the main goal? Or we are just creating it to hit, some ranking on internet, etc.? No, obviously we are creating it to influence our buyers. And if that's true, now the second question that I'm asking, who has direct access to our target buyers? The answer is simple: sales. So sales is your best distribution channel. And we need to explain them how account research might lead to pick up certain relevant content pieces that you guys have already, you marketing, right, have already created. And you can say, we are doing this with Vlad all the time. Just to spark the conversations. And then you, like in this case, hey, I know that you mentioned, I have seen that you mentioned ABM is on your radar, so we created this cheat sheet with our different ABM guides, thought you might enjoy it, thought you might find it valuable, right? This is how you move from account research to pitch, to account research to conversation. So these are the keys, right? Think about beyond the outbound outreach and how to leverage it to make meaningful connections and conversations with your target buyers. So the next one is the buyer engagement. Let's move forward with this one.
All right. So when it comes to buyer engagement, the low efficacy version, again, I mentioned this earlier, we get invited a lot of times to help companies improve the programs that's underperforming. And it kind of looks very frequently like the graph on the right-hand side, where you have, we mentioned this, kind of a wish list, a large list of accounts, where you have the main focus of engagement being, okay, how can we do more? How can we make it more efficient? How can we make it more scalable? And then in the past, scraping lists and sending a lot of emails, running some ads on the whole group, which is kind of showing the same content to everybody. And in a lot of cases, from the marketing perspective, actually focused on whether that's on content downloads or getting people to sign up to the webinar or the event, and then sending those leads to sales, who then in turn run, again, kind of pre-programmed sales sequences to try to book meetings. And what usually happens is that marketing does create some initial engagement. There are some MQLs, marketing qualified leads or accounts in some cases, they call them, but there is not a lot of pipeline being created. The problem is that either the same message goes to everybody, or as we saw, a uniquely irrelevant message goes to everybody now these days, but not a lot has changed. And yeah, like I said, marketing is doing okay, we have a lead sales deal with that. How does the better version look like, a high efficacy version? Well, in addition to doing the marketing activities, you're doing also manual engagement by sales. It's really, we mentioned several times that, first of all, we know that in the target accounts, we have multiple buyers. We need to engage them. We are not only selling to one person, we are selling to multiple people. We need to engage different people in those target accounts. They are different, they have different roles, they have different KPIs, we need to approach them differently. That's all role of sales to do this engagement. There's a lot of opportunity to work together with marketing and leverage some of the marketing touch points for sales engagement. You have here a list on the last point that includes, for example, sharing content that has been prepared by marketing potentially. For example, engagement around the events, pre-event, like people who register an event, I can reach out to them, ask them what they want to learn. I can reach out after the event using bridge activities, but also regular commenting if these buyers are present on social and other non-sales touches. So this is the part that is most frequently missed, and this is like a non-negotiable part. This is the biggest difference between those programs that work and don't work, is exactly having sales being engaged at that level. This changes everything. This you always see a much bigger improvement in terms of conversion rates. And then in terms when it comes to marketing, I think Andrei already mentioned this. Our goal is not to capture leads. Our goal is to educate our buyers and engage them and create engagement opportunities for sales. So we need to focus on creating content that is relevant for those target accounts, whether that's relevant for their for the account clusters that we're focusing on, whether that's relevant for the specific account in the account love letters, as the example that Andrei showed based on the research. This is one big part that we need to focus on. We need to make sure that the content that we are creating is not just optimized, let's say, for the website or the distribution via marketing channels, but it's actually optimized for distribution via sales profiles. For example, helping sales create content for their profiles on social so that they can actually share it in meaningful, like real content that is on the level that buyers get some insight, not the top 10 ways to build a mobile app or something like that. And then also another a role of marketing is to help with engaging maybe with industry leaders or partners, so people that our buyers already trust, and helping sales in one-on-one with preparing buyer enablement content. As you can see, there are actually different multiple touch points. I think it's important to realize that this is multi-channel. You're using social, email, calls, you're using events. It's both sales and marketing touch points. And I think Andrei will explain this. These touch points are connected.
So let's move to how to fix it part. Again, the first thing is that you shouldn't create the playbooks in silos. What we have observed, especially this happening in bigger organizations, when they invite us and they say, okay, so we designed perfect ABM program, like according to the best practices, but sales are sabotaging it. They are not doing what we are telling them to do. And the answer is very simple. Actually, sales are responsible to create sales opportunities. And then somebody who doesn't own pipeline and is not, let's say, responsible for revenue targets comes and says, here's what you're supposed to do. It's not working that way. And just bear with me, don't even try. It will fire back. So on contrary, what makes sense when you qualify the accounts, right? There is tons of this preparation job. This is essential. The next step is defining the patterns of how your buyers are discovering the vendors, how they engage with different vendors. And then you define what would be the best channels and what would be the best activities. 2 weeks ago, we hosted an episode with Elric Legloire, who used to be enterprise account-based sales rep at Chili Piper, as well our great partner. So if you guys didn't tune in, I dropped the link to this episode in the chat. We covered lots of different activities that kind of sales reps could be doing. So just don't want to dive deeper. The key point is that you need to co-create, and you need to not, again, avoid opportunistic thinking here. Just think about the real buyer persona and then define the right channels. Should it be Reddit? Should it be LinkedIn? Should it be a specific community? There is no, let's say, one channel fits all, because by default, lots of marketers think about LinkedIn. No, quite often you should take completely different channels to create your buyers. And then co-create playbooks together with sales. What can we do, right? What marketing can do, what sales can do. And another important point, leverage existing programs. If you are running field events, why not making it account-based event, tailoring it to specific set of accounts and making sure that marketing helps with, let's say, air cover, right? Promoting it by ads, maybe newsletter, etc., and sales try to send direct invites to that event. And next, what should happen after this event, right? The worst thing that you can do, I mean, not the worst thing is not sending any follow-ups, but sending generic follow-up. Hey, you attended the webinar or field event. Let's have a demo is another worst way to do this, right? Define how you're going to segment accounts after the event. Also define how can you engage with them during the event, how you can, what we call progressive profiling, how can you uncover some, important points that you can't identify through the, let's say, desk research, through web research, etc. And what could be good activities that you can do after the event? Because again, when people sign up for the event, it doesn't mean that is the buying intent. Again, we have today maybe 150 people who have signed up for this live episode, but is it the buying intent? No, it's all important for you because you want to maybe hear from us, get some new ideas, some best practices, how to refine your ABM, understand the gaps, etc. Right? Maybe the buying intent will come in future, but if like after this podcast episode, we'll start pitching everybody with Vlad, hey, you attended this live podcast, go and book a call with us. I doubt that it will create good momentum fast. So this is the key, right? Again, forget about linear playbooks, but think about how can we incorporate everything that we are supposed to do it. You're going to produce a big market research or an article. How can we involve our customers, maybe co-create with them? How can we involve sales for the distribution, etc.? So everything that you have already planned should be incorporated in the ABM, right? This is another key to success. And I know that we're almost out of time, so we'll just accelerate here and try to cover everything in the next 10 minutes. So the next block is about the program efficiency. Let's quickly share this, Vlad.
Before, I know that some people will just need to log out on the hour, which is coming up. Let us know what you thought so far about this episode. I really appreciate the feedback. Can be just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down, or any feedback that you have. Really appreciate it, and thanks for coming. If you need to log off, and indeed, let's cover the rest. The next point that we see very frequently undermining the programs is how the programs are being evaluated, how the programs are being measured, or how their efficiency is being evaluated. And we know the standard metrics that are being used, MQLs. And on the one hand, we have the marketing qualified leads, and then on the other hand, we have calls and pipeline. And they only tell part of the story. And especially if you're just starting a new program, they don't tell the whole story. And also, they don't tell you where you can improve. So let's look at a more efficient program, more efficient way of measuring ABM programs, is you need to have leading indicators. You need to know the activities, the actions that you can control. These are the things that you can control. How many accounts did I research and engage? How many did go through the full sequence? How many content pieces have I created, or personalized content pieces, etc., etc. Without knowing that, and it's not about measuring the efficiency of that team so that you can say, hey, you're doing good, you're doing bad, or linking some sort of compensation to that. It's actually just to get the insight into what is our quote unquote velocity, what we are able to do as a team, and whether that's enough for us. So if later we are going to say, hey, you know what, we weren't able to engage that many accounts. Well, let's look at what you've actually done. And if we can see that, you know what, we actually have only sourced properly 10 accounts and we've only engaged with 5 of them, you can't really expect to get much of that program. But instead, we can dive deeper and start to understand why weren't you not able to commit more time. Maybe the team was being pulled in to many directions. Maybe they didn't get a chance to work on the program, etc. Now you can have a reasonable conversation about that and actually fix the bottleneck instead of just saying, hey, the program has failed, let's shut this thing down. The second group of metrics is all about the next level of the kind of those that lag behind, which includes, how many of these accounts have been engaged, how many conversations were we able to start back and forth with those buyers, how many buyer committing members were we able to engage per account, the account penetration, and then finally also obviously the pipeline and revenue metrics, how many discovery calls, what is the pipeline that is being generated. But it's also important to measure the stuff that you can control and the whole journey, because then you will know also where you need to focus in order to improve your program. Andrei, do you want to share how you should go about fixing this?
Sure. So, a couple of things. What Vlad briefly measured, right? It's important to identify the core leading and lagging indicators that you're going to track weekly. And our best recommendation, don't try to immediately set it up in technology or in CRM. It will create lots of mess. It will, you'll definitely spend lots of unnecessary hours to have discussions with your CRM or RevOps manager, etc. So start with a simple dashboard where you can track the metrics on a weekly basis together with sales, right? And again, it's up to you what metrics to put there. The core point is that these are the jointly agreed and approved metrics. Either the number of pieces of content created for sales, number of personalized content hubs, number of specific touch points, right? Like, for example, event invites or whatever. The leading indicators here are the activities that are under your control, something that you can do. And lagging indicators, this is basically the market reaction, right? People sign up for the webinar, this is the lagging indicator. People are visiting your high intent pages, I mean the website pages, this is the lagging indicator. People book the discovery call, this is the lagging indicator. It's not that we control. And I know some unfortunately, some marketers put it in an opposite way, but in reality, something that we all need to accept in complex B2B marketing. We are not controlling the buyer journey and the buyer's decisions. We can't predict when somebody will actually book a discovery call or become a sales opportunity. I don't know. It's like you can make forecasts, but the reality is simple. We can't really control this. But what we can control is what we can do to influence their decisions, right? And that's why it's important to have both leading and lagging indicators, because then you'll see the correlation between your effort and the results. And if you are spending just 1 hour a week, or it gives you a good food for thought. For example, if your sales rep spends on ABM 1 hour a week and you are getting these results, what might happen if sales rep would spend 10 hours a week, right? What would be our leading and lagging indicators and how it's impacting our pipeline? And also what is essential to define the weekly targets. It's something that's, again, for many teams, it's going completely in a completely ad hoc way. We'll do the account research this week. Well, fine. For how many accounts? How many accounts we are going to research? Oh, for sure, we'll invite our accounts for this field event. Okay, fine, but how many? There is a simple, basically, one of the best quotes that Peter Drucker once shared, right? What is not measured can't be controlled. So that's the reality, right? Always set up these weekly targets and have these agreements. And lastly, install regular weekly planning and review meetings. This is the key. Because if you see that a metrics, you don't need to wait 3 months just to see that the program is not performing well, right? Or months. You need, if you see that something is not going well, and if you are not hitting your your success criteria, the metrics, the goals that you set up for yourself, then you need to do something about this, right? And most teams, they never have this. Everything is happening in silos. Okay, this is the shared list of accounts. We'll do something, like as marketing sales will do something. And then we'll figure out if it's working or not working, and maybe let's just create the dashboards and the technology that we have that will demonstrate some kind of influence on pipeline, etc. But this is the surefire way to fail ABM. If you want to make it work, make it tangible, agree on these targets, and set up this weekly planning and review meetings, because we know for sure every week would be different in terms of capacity. You might be preparing for the event. You might have a new product release or launch. Your sales rep might book a few new discovery calls and need to prepare. But so the numbers would vary. But the key point is that you agree, right? What is essential, and you plan it. Now, we have two last points about playbook orchestration and the conversions, which I think we can cover really quickly because it's the part of what we have already shared.
So when it comes to playbook orchestration, there is one thing that I always see when I work with a team who is already implementing their version of ABM, and I see like this big spreadsheet plan where everything is outlined in detail. This is what this team needs to do. This is what the other team needs to do. There's kind of a master plan, and the assumption is that we are planning campaigns before the campaigns run. So we prepare everything and then we launch the campaign, and that's basically the orchestration. And then we also tell sales, oh, by the way, when this happens, you will get an account assigned, and these are the things that you need to do. In other words, playbook orchestration is static. It's upfront defined. What needs to happen? Usually it is standard activities such as, marketing is going to send these emails, it's going to run these ads, promoting our ebooks, white papers, whatnot. So we already mentioned that. And then sales is going to do, a number of engagements on those target accounts. And the planning is kind of like done upfront. It's communicated. And that's basically it. Maybe at the end we may check in once or twice during the campaign and do a report at the end. The way to orchestrate this and get better results is you need to do this together with sales. This needs to be live and dynamic. I always remember a live podcast that we did with one of our clients, and she was head of content. Actually, that was very interesting. And she said that we asked her, like, what was the biggest difference for you? And she said, the biggest difference for me was that I was previously used to having a quarterly plan for my content, my content calendar, and that was it. And I was just working against that calendar. Here, I had to be much more lean and much more dynamic. From week to week, I was adapting to what the sales actually needed. What's happening with those accounts? Which are the accounts that are engaging? What are their needs and their challenges? Maybe we should create content about that. Maybe we should create, one-on-one content for that account that you're trying to engage right now. This is the level of orchestration that should happen on ABM, because then you're actually doing stuff that is relevant for those accounts that are engaged, that they're more engaged, that you should be focusing on more. That's why these weekly planning meetings are so important. And that's why it's important that during those week meetings, you're actually planning how to do this account development. That's a very short intro because we covered a lot of the details before, but maybe Andrei can share a few more words about fixing it.
Yeah. So absolutely. The first one and the most important one, defining your real team's capacity and the responsibilities. You can plan a lot if you want, but if you can't actually execute it, then it's a waste of time, right? Define what is realistic, who will be a part of this ABM program, and what is the realistic time commitment. Because when we hear a question, how many accounts should be a part of this program, then we ask two follow-up questions. How much time sales rep is going to spend on ABM, and how many buyers per account should we engage? Because if in one account we need to engage 20 people, right, and sales rep can spend whatever 2 hours a week in ABM, then our account list would be maybe, in the best case scenario, 5, 6, 7 accounts maximum, right? So this is the entire story. everything that you are going to plan should be aligned with the team's capacity. The next point. Create a quota program. Again, I'm just sharing the screenshot so from the course. So if you guys just to show you the videos, if you want to dive deeper into these parts of, let's say, program orchestration, you can just go through it in more detail in the course. Build a calendar, right? The entire point that one playbook should be built on another. You're going to do the market research, right? After the market research, you might plan the field event or webinar where you're going to release it. After this webinar, you're going to produce a blog article that you can distribute, etc., etc. The key point is just to avoid these static playbooks where, okay, we're running this air cover and that's it. And then maybe somewhere in the quarter we'll host this webinar and transfer all attendees to sales. No, the entire point is that you build a gradual development and how each, like in that time frame, all these activities should be connected. That would be the key. And the last thing is planning this weekly success metrics. What tells you that you had a good week, right? You are setting up, not us or somebody else should give you the benchmarks or whatever, the weekly targets. You define it for yourself. You are hosting the webinar or field event. What criteria, what number of target accounts, target buyers more specifically, that signed up for that event would make it a success? This is what you define together, and then you start working on it, right? This is the key. For everything that you're doing, you then break it down into weekly targets, and you start working on it as the team. This is how you actually move the needle instead of doing opportunistic approaches and calling it ABM, right? That's the key. And the last point is the conversion benchmarks. Maybe just to wrap it up very quickly, is it's very simple. What we love to track is account to pipeline ratio, not very, let's say, famous metric. But the entire point of this metric is looking at how many accounts you actually included into your ABM program and how many of them became sales opportunities. If your conversion rate from account to pipeline is below 1%, this is the low efficacy. If it's in between 5 to 15%, this is the high efficacy, right? And this is kind of the benchmark that if you ask where it's coming from, it's just coming from our successful ABM programs. We know the difference between unsuccessful and successful, right? Maybe the best one that we had was something with, if I'm correct, with test trail around 22.
Yeah, it's about 20.
Percent.
It's about 20, yeah. Like also with Cross Knowledge Wiley, out of 150 accounts, I think it was like 26% that she was able to engage in multiple meetings, not necessarily concretely pipeline, but it was about 20%.
Awesome. Sure. And that's it. So we gave you kind of our benchmarks, not the industry benchmarks, but something that we are seeing from the, let's say, successful and unsuccessful ABM programs. We highlighted 5 core areas where the companies, what they call ABM, we'll share it with you, the setup that leads to low efficacy and the setup that leads to high efficacy, and give you actionable tools. And again, if you'd like to dive deeper into this, you can check our full funnel ABM playbook or our full funnel academy. I dropped also a link to our fullfunnel.io/podcast page where you can find the links to the platforms like Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, etc., and where you can listen to all the previous recordings and also get a notification when this recording will be available. Thank you so much, all. It was amazing day with you guys. Fantastic questions, great engagement, and see you in 1 week. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.